Hi, I'm Jalea, welcome to my channel. If today's tutorial is helpful, do subscribe. This is a hopefully quick tutorial on how to make rosettes and bows to bling up your shoes to go with your ball gown or dress, particularly in Victorian, but also earlier eras. A really quick and cheap way of making your shoes look very fancy. You are going to need a matching ribbon to make your rosettes out of, or if you prefer, I'll show you a technique for using scraps from your dress to make it match. A scrap of felt or thick wool that's nice and non-stretchy. The usual sewing paraphernalia, so thread, scissors, pins, needles, a sewing machine preferably, and these little things which are shoe clips. I will put the link down below, and these are the things that clip them to your shoes. That's it, let's do it. The basic rosette can be done several ways. You can either do it completely by hand or use your machine to assist. So to do them by hand, you want a piece of ribbon. I recommend about 1 inch wide. You can make them smaller and I will show you those, but 1 inch is easier to start with. And about 1 yard, 1 metre long. If you've got artificial material ribbon, modern ribbon, just melt the end. That gives you a non-fraying edge there. You haven't got to worry about that. Get yourself a needle and thread. And then we are simply going to run a gathering thread about 1/8 of an inch in from the bottom edge. You don't want to go right at the bottom edge, it just doesn't work as well. And then simply do a running gather stitch all the way along the ribbon. Obviously usually you'd do this in a matching thread, but I thought it would be easier to see if it was contrasting. Don't need these stitches to be too small, and just do that all the way along the length of the ribbon. When you start getting short thread, just gather it up a bit, because it's going to be gathered anyway, so there's no point having thread the full length. Then right at the end, instead of going along to the end, just take your thread up in a vaguely diagonal line to the opposite corner. This will give you a nice little centre in a moment. There we go. What's that? Right. Now for the clever bit. So just gather it up. Don't worry about the evenness for a minute. Till that gathering thread is about 10 inches long, 25 centimetres. Just the gathering thread, don't worry about the gathering for a minute. You might want to experiment with its actual length and just stick a couple of stitches in the end just to hold that gathering thread in place so that can no longer wander. If you want to leave this thread on for sewing later, it can be quite useful. Once you've done that, start evening out these gathers a little bit. You'll find that it rotates round the thread and we want it all on one side eventually, so now is a good time to try and unrotate this and even out those gathers down to the other end. Next step, you're going to need a pencil. Taking this end that has the weird cross piece on it, we're going to take thread and start, without moving the gathers too much, just rolling the thread that you've stitched around the pencil. See the ribbon as well, keeping the thread always at the bottom. Keep it snug, but putting it too tight can make it awkward to keep the gathers in, and just let the thread part overlie itself. So you're keeping the ribbon vertical, making a cylinder effectively. And if it's twisted, just untwist it and keep laying those frills fairly evenly on top of each other. It's not critical, but you want that to make a nice layer. Now then, a couple of options here. Stick a pin through one side like that, and stick a pin through the other side, and then just slide it off your pencil. There we go. Now, rethread this needle. Perhaps white wasn't the best colour. Let's drop down so the thread's at the back if it wasn't already. And you're basically just going to sew these layers together. You don't want to crush what you've made. You just want to whip all these layers together. On this one I'm going from the centre out. I've got this little sticky out bit that was part of where I did the thread across. Just kind of merge it in. You can take the pins out when you're ready. Nobody's going to see this bit. We're going to cover this bit up. Just make sure you are catching all the layers. Just keep working around. Make sure you catch the end, which is here. And if you've got any layers that you don't like the look of, just give them an extra stitch. Almost there. Okay, so now we want a bit of firm felt. This is actually some wool I've got handy because I can't find any felt. And you just want to cut a circle that's about the size of your fluffy edges, plus a little bit. Mine's about 1 inch across, so I just find it easier just to cut a square of 1 inch. Cut 1 inch. Just round that off. It's not that critical. Again, this is hidden. And if you can get it to match your ribbon, great. But again, it's not really going to be seen. and then we're just going to sew this onto there. So this is not couture sewing. Simply going to sew these outside edges to the felt, and this just gives you a nice strong base for your rosette to sit on. The observant may have noticed that this symbol is too big for me. All my other symbols have vanished and I don't know where they've gone. I suspect active teenager. If you've got enough thread left, like I have, just grab your shoe clip, sew it on. Make sure you open it up. It will go onto the shoe. So your foot is that way, so you need to do it that way round if you have a preference. And this bit will go at the edge of the shoe, so you can just decide where you want that to go. If you've got a very big rosette, put 2 on. It's also worth just 1 stitch just across that bar there. That will just help stop the rosette lifting. Tie that off. There we go, done. 1 red shoe rosette. You can make rosettes with ribbon narrower than 1 inch, but it's a little bit more fiddly. If you have access to a ruffling foot, then these are very quick. This one has been ruffled. You get these lovely little pleats. It is better to ruffle and luff for 2 at the same times. This has ended up about 15 centimetres long. It was 1 metre. It's ended up about 15 inches. And then it's simply the same as before, but a bit more fiddly. So you can either use a pencil or you can roll it on itself. It's personal choice when they're this tiny. Because this is a modern synthetic ribbon, it's quite stiff, which is easier to do. You want your good side inside. You can get into a bit of a rhythm. Just roll it up, make sure that this doesn't twist. So you're just trying to get a nice flat rosette on the bottom there. Keep rolling. So I'm just trying to keep this really flat. Obviously the length of your ribbon will determine the size of your rosette. Don't get too tight here. You can always sew this as you go if you prefer, but I find that more hassle than it's worth, to be honest. Tuck that in and then just sew across the back in the same way as we did with the others. Put the felt pad on, done. Very delicate little rosettes. So if you really want to match your dress exactly, you can use fabric from the dress. So this is a scrap that was about 25 inches long, and I cut a scrap 2 inches wide. Then I have, in this case, used a ruffle foot to pleat it up. This one I have machine gathered, sewn machine gathers and then gathered up. And obviously you can do it by hand as well. And then you can just manipulate them to make pretty little rosette. You can see they naturally curl. It's just a matter of curling them up. I found with these looser ones, it's sometimes better to start from the outside. So say that's going to be the size of my rosette, and just curl them in. Keep twisting. You do need to do a little bit of fiddling, and then the last bit you need to tuck down and stitch over. They can be a bit more flat at the back. They really are that easy. Perhaps put a bead or a little bit of folded fabric in there, and that will match your dress. This one's a big blousy soft rose type rosette. Again, I've just gathered it until it starts to curl. Take advantage of that natural curl. This end you can either gather down or just stitch into place in the centre, perhaps with a bead or a jewel. Fold it round, sew through like we have before, cover it with a bit of felt so you should clip on. It really is that easy. Bows. I'm going to make these to match a dress. I've got some scraps. I've already done one. You want the scrap of fabric to be the width you want your bow plus 2 seam allowances, which in my case is about 3 inches, and twice the length plus seam allowances. So in my case that's about 10 inches. This is a big bow though. If you want little delicate bows, then you need to make them a bit smaller. Great thing about these is they don't need to be too super precise. Decide which side is out. Doing this side is the right side. Just fold your seam allowance in. Don't sew it, just fold it in. Press it if you need to. End seam allowance is folded in and pressed. Then right sides together, fold into the middle. Just have those 2 edges touching. That's about right. And then we're going to sew along there and there. Okay, so we've got that little packet. Trim the seam allowance if you want to, and if your fabric can cope with that. And then you need to turn this the right way out. Fold that out. Well, if you're doing tiny ones, this one's a bit more fiddly, but yeah, it'll be fine. There we go. So we've got a little pillowcase. I'm just very quickly, very roughly, just going to sew this so it doesn't gape. There we go. Leave that thread on for a minute. We can just use that Okay, so now you're going to need another scrap of fabric that is twice the width you want this, plus a seam allowance. So mine is meant to be about 1/2 inch. So I think I went for 1 inch and a bit, and 2 inches long. I just overlapped it. Effectively, you want it just over twice that, and how flat you want these to be. I know I'm being vague, but everybody's going to be different. Wrong sides together. We're just going to sew down there, like so. Then I'm going to press this like that. I know it's a bit scruffy, but it doesn't matter. Taking this same thread, we're now going to run gathering stitch, fairly big, personal choice again, right down the middle of our bow. And just pull it gently. And then it's quite good to just stick that thread back right through. And it makes it more even if you're pulling from both ends effectively then. Again, pretty personal choice how puffed you want that bow to be. And then take this piece and just lay it over the middle where you want it. Turn it over, fold one side, fold the other side, and just tuck the raw end underneath and sew it all in place. How tight you want your bow depends on what overlap you have here. Get the same thread if you can, or a new one if you can't, and just sew this shut first. Give it a squiggle and then make sure that's in the right place, and just tack this to the actual bow as well so that it doesn't shift around when you're wearing it. And there we go. They don't quite match, but that's because this one's been made on camera and this one hasn't. If you want to put them on your shoes, which obviously you do, you're going to need some shoe clips. And it's very simple. If you've got a nice firm fabric like this, you can just sew it straight on. If this is flimsy, then it's worth getting a square of just sewing it on there first to make it a bit firmer for the shoe clip to sit on. There we go. Bows for your shoes.